Our prayers reveal a great deal about who we are. They reveal much more about our spiritual health and maturity than we'd like to think. They tell of our grasp of truth and the measure of our devotion. They declare the depth of our reverence and our humility. But we must remember that a prayer is not a speech that is being made to God or to man. It's not a performance. It's not a ritual. God is the focus. He is the one that is being addressed. And faith in Him and love for Him leads us to pray, even as it leads us to examine and strive to correctly order every aspect of our life. But empty words, no matter how well rehearsed or polished they may be, will weaken us spiritually. Jesus prayed very often, and He taught His disciples to pray, as we read in Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 13, in what we refer to as the model prayer or the Lord's Prayer. But also His prayer recorded in John 17 is without equal. The requests that He made in that prayer were ruled incomparable. They were reverent and humble and grateful. But in larger measure, Jesus' life exemplified not only His devotion to the Father, but also the language of prayer. Inspired by God, the Apostle Paul recorded a number of his prayers. The book of Ephesians contains two of those inspired prayers. The first chapter contains what must be finally spoken of as an anthem of praise to God in Ephesians 1, verses 3 through 14. It indicates that the language of prayer is the language of praise. And the expression, "Blessed be God," literally means praise be to God. Then in Ephesians 1, verses 15 and 16, Paul expressed thanksgiving for the church, and his words stand as an example of the expression of thanksgiving in prayer. Paul was specific in the expression of his thanksgiving. In Ephesians 1, verses 17 through 19, Paul makes requests for the church. His requests were connected with Christ and with the power by which He was raised from the dead. Paul was mindful of the fact that the same power was involved in the elevation of the redeemed, or the church. Paul's prayer, or at least the words that he used, stand in dramatic contrast to the words and phrases we commonly use today. But we need to stop from time to time and ask ourselves, do we pray like Paul did? And if not, can we pray like Paul did? Well, beginning in Ephesians 3 and verse 14, Paul recorded another prayer. He began with a very heartwarming expression, "I bow my knee unto the Father." The focus of prayer is the Father. He is the one from whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named. The family, referring to the church, is named by Him, and doubtless this implies more than simply a verbal designation. The church is the family, the redeemed, those who are one with the Father and with each other. The language that Paul used expresses the intimate spiritual unity that must exist among God's people. Paul then spoke of the riches of His glory and requested that the church be strengthened with might by His Spirit in the inner man, Ephesians 3 and verse 16. The redeemed are not only recipients of all spiritual blessings, they are also recipients of the virtues of spiritual devotion. And Paul expressed this request, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, Ephesians 3 and verse 17, and by this supplying the sense of belonging, having their hearts and minds molded and revitalized, enabling them to be rooted and grounded in love, that they may come together to comprehend God's love and His surpassing knowledge. Paul prayed for their greatest need, their coming to grasp the love of God, to the end that they be filled with all of the fullness of God, Ephesians 3 and verse 19. And his words illustrate the depth of prayer. Friends, Christians are to attain spirituality, and they are to desire to attain spirituality. And in this regard, it is to be carefully considered that two things make us strong. First, a deep sense of need, and number two, a strong hope of supply. That supply God alone can provide, and furthermore, God desires to supply that need. And in this regard, it is to be insisted that the language of prayer is the language of need and of desire. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and have a blessed day.